Part 38. Infinite Doomsday Start Draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 371. Withdraw the supplies first, then find a chance to come back. Google search reading. This is the best solution that Sarah, the adjutant who is now in charge of commanding the rogue troops, can think of. Of course, this is the embarrassing situation of the rogue troops without the leadership of a senior commander. If they get guidance from Sarah, Tia or any of the three Rugers, they have other ways to survive. Sarah follows the traditional route of the rogues, which is probably closely related to the traditional combat skills of the rogues, needless to say. As for Tia, she only needs to help the self-propelled mortar reset a set of attack trajectories to bypass Andariel, which can perfectly solve the problem that the shells will be intercepted by that guy. However, although the methods of the two are good, they are not as unpredictable and cunning as the other guy. And this is still the two people's own comments on that guy. So, after discovering that the situation on the rogue side was not good, Tia, who lost the rocket booster and fell from the air, took 2 steps to run, and then jumped behind the huge beast that Sarah was riding. Whispering to Sarah, she ran towards Ruger's little leopard again. While running, she shouted to him, "You, go back and command the rogue troops. The monster tide is too much pressure on them now. Also, we both need more supporting firepower here, you think of a way. By the way, I'll requisition your little leopard, I also need a high-speed mount." For what Tia said before, Ruger nodded in agreement. But when he heard that she wanted to requisition her little leopard, Ruger couldn't help but laugh and said, "Requisition is fine, but can you use one in exchange? Where's my Enoch? Are you going to let me go back with my legs?" Oh, I forgot. Tia had already jumped onto the turret of the little leopard at this time, looking at Ruger in the half-open cockpit in front, making faces at him and acting cute. "My dear husband, please forgive me this time." His Ruger couldn't help but take a breath of cold air when he heard it, and hurriedly opened the cockpit that was already half open, jumped out, and gave the driving seat to Tia, who jumped down from the rear turret. It's not that Tia's 2 words were not coquettish, but it was too perfect, so that it was completely inconsistent with her original personality, which made Ruger at a loss. This person who doesn't speak softly and quietly suddenly becomes very gentle, especially women, especially the main wife, then men should be careful. Maybe it's a replica of De Lang, it's time to take medicine. Ba ba ba. Ruger hurriedly said a few words in his heart, thinking that his little Tia would never become a little pen. While he was sorting out his thoughts, Tia had already mastered the operation of the modified leopard and immediately turned the gun to fire at Andariel, who was chasing Sarah. This armor-piercing shell hit Andariel's shoulder and pulled out a bunch of red blood with a little green fluorescence, which immediately attracted the hatred of the poisonous Demon King. However, Tia muttered with some dissatisfaction, "Why is it an armor-piercing shell again? It's not easy to use. I don't like it." As she said that, she took a walk and ran back to Ruger and shouted to him, "Replace the ammunition for me, at least replace the cabins you shot down with other ones. You know. I know." Ruger thought to himself that your hobby is the easiest to understand, isn't it just a big bomb, there are plenty of armor-piercing shells. Since the modified Leopard is specially designed for Ruger to use, the structure of the magazine reloading is naturally improved for his way of directly releasing ammunition from the logistics space. So Ruger only stayed by the little Leopard for less than 2 seconds, and then filled all the empty magazines in the automatic turret with armor-piercing bullets for Tia. And he also changed the ammunition type identification switches of these magazines from armor-piercing bullets to armor-piercing bullets. After that, Tia only needs to use the automatic loader to continue to select armor-piercing bullets for the main gun, and the thing will take out these new ammunition in turn. To put it bluntly, it is not complicated. It is to make a set of devices similar to the ratchet of the automatic weapon speed machine outside the magazine, so that when the loader automatically passes by, it can directly determine whether to take the ammunition here through the mechanical mechanism of the ratchet. If not, then go along and find the next magazine position. If yes, immediately extract the ammunition here. Without electronic circuits to take care of these small things, only mechanical structures can be used to achieve the same purpose. Ruger has now walked out a unique way on this road. After replacing the new ammunition, Tia immediately did a quick tail spin, forming a T-shape with Andariel who was chasing her, and turned 90 degrees with the movable turret, firing the next shell at the guy. As soon as the shell left the tube, Tia immediately accelerated and fled, taking Andariel away from Ruger like walking a dog. The armor-piercing shell flew a short distance in the air, and stuck firmly on Andariel's huge and handsome face like a dogskin plaster. Then there was a bang, followed by Andariel's painful and angry wailing, and Tia's cheering mixed with pride. "Don't worry, leave this to us, you go back and support the rogues." She didn't forget to remind Ruger. "Don't pretend that you don't have a car, I know you don't need that kind of thing." Looking at the back of Tia, the little leopard running away, and the angry and cannibalistic Andariel over there, Ruger shook his head helplessly, thinking that with your way of hitting people in the face, how could he be at ease? But there was no way to be at ease. In the matter of being a big bomber, 10 of himself would not be able to persuade half of Tia. He could only go back quickly and free up more supporting firepower for the two as early as possible. As for the method of returning quickly, it is indeed as Tia said, Ruger has plenty of it. But there are not many that can be used with a full set of Iron Man armor. What? Take off the Iron Man armor? Forget it, he is not a Nephilim. If any hell monster is blind and shoots a flying knife here, it will be enough for him to drink a pot. Fortunately, Shalashia has shown him another set of high-speed movement methods in succession before, which gave him a lot of inspiration. That's right, those rocket boosters. Well, he actually used them not long ago. But in fact, those who are interested should have discovered that the rocket booster he used when jumping out of the underground tomb pit before felt very different from the one used by Tia and Sarah. It seems that his rocket booster has greater power and is more powerful, but the speed is a little worse. Yes, that's right. The problem is that he is not a Nephilim. A normal person can withstand about 12 times the acceleration of gravity from the back to the chest, which is 12 g overload. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Ai Chi Ji. Chapter 372. 12G, this is the extreme value with no side effects in a short time. After long-term corresponding training, this bearing time can be extended to the extreme peak. But in fact, fighter pilots in reality generally only train to 9 times the acceleration of gravity, that is, to withstand 9G overload for a short time. Of course, that is also related to the fact that they need not only the overload bearing capacity from the back to the chest. The overload bearing capacity of the human body in directions such as head to feet is even worse. Ruger's physical fitness has now exceeded the limit of ordinary humans, but he can only withstand 20G overload for less than 10 seconds. But Tia and Sarah are extraordinary people. Let alone 20G overload, even if they are added to 50G or 100G, it is not a problem to continue for dozens of seconds. The booster that Sarah used before, which allowed her to increase her speed from 10 meters per second to 100 meters per second in 1 second, is equivalent to an overload of more than 90 G. And she had no negative reaction at all. The acceleration limit that the body can withstand is different, which is why the feeling of Tia Sarah's rocket booster is completely different from that of Ruger's. The maximum overload used by Ruger is limited to about 10 G. In order to avoid the engine accidentally running for 5 or 6 seconds or even more than 10 seconds, exceeding his tolerance limit and knocking him out. So he can't run up and fly into a cruise missile with the help of rocket boosters like the two women. Fortunately, he has more options in terms of mechanics. For example, put on a pair of huge leg armor that looks like skateboard shoes, fix it with mechanical buckles, and then ignite the rocket booster behind him. So, a simple jet car with a rocket engine as the power device and a skateboard as the movement device just ran on the ground. The speed is not fast, at least it is far from 100 meters per second. But after 10 seconds, he still successfully rushed through the Inuk tank array and returned directly to the vicinity of several self-propelled mortars. Seeing Ruger rushing over with fire all the way, the rogues thought he had eaten some kind of devil pepper for breakfast. Well, the rogues were not so careless. They just followed the method Ruger shouted to them, randomly found a towing rope on a car, and the 4 people were divided into 2 teams. 2 people stretched the thing, just like the arresting rope of an aircraft carrier, to help the carrier-based aircraft land, hooking Ruger, who had no time to brake. As a result, the towing rope pulled by the rogue's arms just stopped at the waist of Ruger's iron armor, and the rope was too thin and the force-bearing surface was not enough, so he directly made a half-horizontal bar big loop on the thing. Why half? Because when he turned to the upper half, one of the 4 rogues slipped and the rope loosened, and he was slapped to the ground with a snap. My lord! The rogues rushed over to save him. It's okay, I'm fine. Ruger was so embarrassed, but he quickly stood up from the ground, pretending that everything was under control. He coughed lightly, waved his hand directly at the 4 rogues, and began to arrange the work. Seeing him like this, several rogues who were familiar with him wanted to laugh. For example, Miss G36 in the HK 4-man team. However, after listening to his orders one by one, the rogues soon forgot about it and devoted themselves to the new round of work. There was no way. On the one hand, Ruger arranged everything calmly and in an orderly manner, but when it came to the executor rogue, it was a mess and he was very busy. On the other hand, as new tasks were issued, they also had more novel tasks to deal with. The core concept of Ruger's series of arrangements was actually not complicated at all. Isn't it because the shells of the self-propelled mortars will be intercepted by Andariel at will? Well, then the rogue artillerymen will not be allowed to continue using mortars whose shells fly too slowly. Even directly skipping the howitzers, Ruger replaced them with a batch of 75mm caliber 46 caliber Pak 40 anti-tank guns. Yes, that was the kind he used most in the ghostly dungeon. He used to have more than a dozen of these guns, but later he sold them to the system store to make room for other tanks. But now, with the massive points that the rogues got from the Hell monsters, it would only take a few minutes for him to exchange them. The most important thing is that he once made an external mechanical arm automatic loader for this thing, and it was just right to take it out for the rogues to use at the same time, which could also save them a member of the artillery crew who was a loader. However, the ammunition rack of his version of the automatic loader did not have a high capacity, just over 10 rounds in total, so the rogues still needed to move ammunition from the logistics supply vehicle from time to time. The reason why they didn't put a bunch of spare ammunition near the artillery position was very simple, because they were afraid that a large amount of ammunition would explode if hit by the enemy, and the members of the artillery crew would also be killed. After Luger recovered several self-propelled mortars, he took out the Pak 40s and demonstrated them to the rogues. He also warned them that these guns were just consumables and were for them to practice. As long as they could practice artillery skills with this gun, it would be the biggest gain. Once they found that the monster tide had signs of breaking through the blockade and attacking here, Luger repeatedly warned these rogue gunner seeds that they must not care about these guns. Their escape is the biggest victory. And with their Lord Luger here, they can make as many guns as they want in the future. Luger's words are not just to curry favor with the rogues or win their hearts. He is really pragmatic. In fact, for this final battle, he built a whole space of 88mm cannons and rapid-fire mortar howitzers of the same caliber in his logistics space. The 2 types of guns cover all 4 types of guns. However, these guns are placed on 4-wheel trailer gun carriages instead of conventional 2-wheel towed gun carriages, and everything from aiming to automatic loading is designed for his telekinesis ability, so it is better to exchange Pak-40 directly for rogues at this time. This leads to a problem, that is, the mobility of conventional classic towed guns such as Pak-40 is almost zero. Compared with them, the previous Grizzly self-propelled mortars, and even the heavy and clumsy Sturmtiger self-propelled mortars, are considered to be flexible and agile. If the monster tide really breaks through the defense line and attacks, it is impossible for the rogues to retreat with the guns. It is better to let them save the people and lose the guns, and gain both the people and the guns. Seeing Ruger patiently teaching and looking at them with sincere eyes, telling them not to worry about the guns when they are in danger and to run first, how can the rogues not be moved? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Ai-chi. Chapter 373. For those whose favorability was increased, I am afraid that several of them were directly increased to the top. Google search reading. If the rogues did not know the special relationship between Ruger and their immediate superiors, that was not convenient to tell outsiders, and that the superior was quite petty about the relationship between someone and others, especially women, I am afraid that several of them would have taken action against someone. It took a long time to talk about it, but in fact it only took a short time for Ruger to complete the basic artillery training for the rogues. In fact, with the automatic loader, the work intensity of the artillery was immediately reduced by half. In addition, 7 or 8 of the rogues have already had experience in operating self-propelled mortars, so it will be easier to use direct-fire artillery such as anti-tank cannons. Moreover, in order to simplify the operation, Ruger also simplified the applicable artillery shells a lot. Originally, Pak-40 had 4 types of conventional ammunition. The first was the most common and perhaps the most common anti-tank ammunition in the zoo in the late World War II, APC, the wind-capped armor-piercing shell. The second was the hardcore armor-piercing shell improved on this basis, UPCR. Among them, the hardcore is the core of the armor-piercing projectile that Ruger has been using until now, the tungsten core. The third is heat, which is armor-piercing projectile. The fourth is He, high explosive projectile. However, these are shells from the World War II era. Not only are they not up to date, but they are also not very suitable for dealing with monsters. So Ruger directly simplified them into 3 types. The most common is the hardcore armor-piercing projectile from the World War II era. This is a special bullet for dealing with elite monsters and above with specialized defense. Andariel is also in this list. The reason why APC is not used is that when the horse bears fought the poisonous Demon King before, the wind cap at the front end of the bullet to reduce wind resistance would be quickly corroded, causing its trajectory to be unstable, thereby reducing accuracy. In this case, it is better to use tungsten core bullets with better corrosion resistance. Even if the soft metal on the outside of it will be corroded, it will be much less affected by the chaotic wind resistance due to the material and weight comparison of the bullet core. That is to say, it is relatively accurate in the poisonous cloud. In addition to the UPCR hardcore armor-piercing projectile, the second most common ammunition is the He high explosive projectile. This is for the rogue artillerymen to help the front line Inuk infantry fighting vehicles solve the monster tide problem. Although the 75mm caliber shells are not charged enough, it should be enough to bully the cannon fodder monsters. As for the monsters that cannot be killed by high explosive shells, what else can be done? Use UPCR. The third type, which is also the least amount of ammunition, is the shrapnel shells with only a few rounds per gun. There is no doubt that this is reserved for the rogues to attack monsters when they escape to buy time. They need to be combined with delayed fuses to work at a long distance, which requires too much skill from the gunners, and Ruger is too late to teach them now. So these shrapnel shells are all the best short-range anti-infantry defense ammunition at 300-500 meters. Ruger settled the rogues here and was about to leave the third-line artillery position to go to the second-line infantry line, but heard a series of electric bells ringing in the logistics space. No way. So fast. This sound was the alarm-like sound that Ruger set when he arranged the self-manufacturing task for the logistics space. And no matter which task he arranged before, theoretically, it should not be completed at this time. As he lamented, it was too fast. He hurriedly calmed down and entered the logistics space to check, and saw that the trial-produced prototype on the number 3 position of the vehicle manufacturing workshop of the bunker arsenal had entered the test drive state under the simulation of the humanoid labor robot. That thing was nothing else but a Pak-40 anti-tank gun installed on the chassis of a light tank. In other words, it was the idea of the Zoo country to first develop tank destroyers in World War II, and move the Pak-40 to the Lorraine 37L crawler tractor seized from the neighbor next door to the west. That is the so-called Weasel 1 tank destroyer. But although the idea was the same, Ruger did not attack the chassis seized from the neighbor next door to the west. He went to the mysterious underground city with the secret underground arsenal of the Zoo country. So the chassis of the light track tanks under 10 tons in his hands are all owned by the Zoo. For example, the Panzer II and Panzer III. What? What about the Panzer I and Panzer IV? The Panzer I is too light and too small. It is not impossible to install a 75mm anti-tank gun, but it can only be equipped with 24 caliber tank guns such as the Panzer III and Panzer IV and the derivative assault guns. The chassis of the Panzer I is only a little over 4 meters, and the original vehicle was even just over 5 tons. The main gun Pak-40 used by Ruger, although the caliber is not large and the caliber is not amazing, has a high recoil travel. Simply put, after firing a shot, the thing recoils a lot. In this way, the small chassis of the Panzer I is really not enough. To be honest, the Panzer II is barely enough, but fortunately, the Zoo has tried it during World War II. The first version of the Weasel 2 tank destroyer is a Panzer II chassis equipped with a Pak-40. As for the Panzer IV, well, there is no problem for the Panzer IV to install this gun. However, wouldn't that mean the horse-bear tanks are retreating to the Inuk front to help? Ruger's knowledge of the armored vehicles of the Zoo family is actually a gap. Because he is an experienced person, he subconsciously pays more attention to those mature platforms that have performed well in the later battlefields. During the Cold War, he was more familiar with Leopard 2, which is the Leopard 2 series, Puma infantry fighting vehicles, etc., but he tended to ignore Leopard 1 series, Weasel infantry fighting vehicles and other early Cold War ones. During World War II, he was more familiar with the late classics such as the Leopard, Tiger, and Ferdinand tank destroyer. At most, he added the Panzer III and IV and their derivatives, and the Panzer IV platform was the main one. As for the Panzer I and II, the LT-35 and LT-38 captured from other countries, he was not familiar with them either. Of course, this can't be completely blamed on him. After all, the Zoo equipment he is using now has two major sources. The equipment left by the Zoo Federal Armed Forces when they fought against the Ghosts during the Cataclysm, which is still in service in the early 21st century. And the late World War II equipment seized from the Zoo underground arsenal in the Ghost underground city. The source of the equipment limited his cognition. Just now, when he was replacing the Pak-40 with the Rogue artillery, he reminded the Rogues to protect themselves and that if they didn't have time to throw away their equipment, they could just throw it away. At the same time, he was secretly muttering whether he should just put these anti-tank guns on some self-moving platforms. He had also messed around with large caliber guns on the small body of the Weasel airborne tank. So after searching the raw material pool for a while, he casually designed a so-called tank destroyer that used the chassis of the No. 2 tank to carry a Pak-40 with only the wheels removed and the gun carriage unchanged. He then handed it over to the industrial robot in the vehicle workshop for trial production. It was only when he checked the information in the main control computer of the industrial robot that he realized why this thing was produced so quickly this time. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 374. This was so fast that it was beyond Lugger's imagination. It didn't take more than 2 minutes to complete. The reason is also simple. Chassis number 2 itself is a finished product restored from the raw material pool. This process takes less than 10 seconds. It only takes about 10 seconds to remove the wheels of the Pak-40 anti-tank gun. Just put the latter behind the former, clang clang clang, and a Weasel 2 tank destroyer is ready. Well, in fact, the real Weasel Phase 2 is not so rough. Writing this, I hope readers will remember our domain name Taiwan Novel Network rightward arrow diamondsuit. However, it is precisely because the main control computer has a ready-made production plan for the Weasel Phase 2, so even if Ruger gave an extremely rough and unreliable design plan, the vehicle workshop also provided it under the logistics space correction feature. He forced the chariot out. This tank destroyer might as well just call it a self-propelled anti-tank gun. It is one level lower than the self-propelled anti-tank gun and one level higher than the towed gun. It is such a special gun. Although the overall design idea is very hasty, it is still better than a simple towed gun. However, when Lugger took this thing out to the Rajas, they all did not want to use it without exception. The reason is always the same: it's ugly. Luigi thought to himself, why is he ugly again? Isn't the Grizzly self-propelled mortar you used just now ugly? Or is the Assault Tiger self-propelled mortar not ugly? Now this is equivalent to a bear crawler chassis with an anti-tank gun that removes 2 wheels and directly welds the big frame to the back of the chassis. How can this be called ugly? This can only be called crude. Okay, sir, let's just say it's a shabby headquarters, right? Because she was familiar with Ruger, Miss G36 was unanimously recommended by Ruger's artillerymen to negotiate with him. We don't want to use it anyway, we think it's crude. Hiss. Luigi thought in his heart that these little girls are getting harder and harder to serve. Are you still picky? But forget it, the engine of this thing has not been replaced with a new one anyway. It is a World War II vintage gasoline engine produced by the Maybach Master Alchemist. The power of this thing was sufficient at the time, but compared with the technology decades later, it was far behind. Even saying I can barely move is not a disgrace to my senior. Driving this kind of chassis, it is impossible to fight with high maneuverability like other combat vehicles produced by Ruger. Not to mention that the mobility is not even comparable to that of the horse and bear tanks. This self-propelled anti-tank gun still has to stop when it fires. It's really a barely movable design. Therefore, even if this thing is used by the ROG artillery, it cannot transform them from 2 towed artillery companies into 2 self-propelled artillery companies. The only use of this thing is that when the ROG artillerymen are really attacked by a surging tide of monsters and retreat, it can accompany them in their retreat, and provide fire support from time to time. That's all. So Ruger didn't force it? But in the end, he kept 2 of these guns, and focused on their role of accompanying retreat and fire support to ROG, especially the G36 Lady. In the end, the ROGs had to agree that his idea was indeed reasonable and should be taken into consideration. As a result, with the frustrated expression on Miss G36's face, her original Inuk crew and another crew of 6 people became users of these 2 self-propelled anti-tank guns. Lugger, on the other hand, was snickering as he got into his specially modified Inuk that Taya had driven back before, and turned around to go to the infantry fighting vehicle front. The second line of defense infantry fighting vehicle array and the dozen or so Inuk armored vehicles had almost all the M2A1 heavy machine gun ammunition at the bottom. When Lugger came here, the first thing he did was to quickly make an extraordinary large-scale supply for them. In fact, He personally went to the heavy machine gun of each vehicle, directly filled each empty ammunition box with a full box of ammunition belts, and then replaced the spare ammunition boxes that had been empty with the full ammunition version. The monsters Rogue's kill now allow him to get almost 100% points, so he is also generous when replenishing ammunition for Rogues. The heavy machine gun ammunition chain consists of 4 armor-piercing high-explosive incendiary bombs and 1 armor-piercing tracer bullet. The infantry's automatic rifles of the same caliber are replenished with sub-caliber armor-piercing rounds. After a period of actual combat, Ruger's automatic rifle, which was specially improved for the Rajas and could fire continuously, was naturally used by the Rajas as a single shot. Because they are far enough away from the target and the output environment is safe enough, there is no need to sacrifice accuracy to increase firepower. Instead, they are more inclined to make every bullet fired valuable. As a result, in the end, the Ruger version of the automatic Barrett was no different from the original semi-automatic in the hands of Ruger people. All I can say is that no matter where they go, gun masters are the same. Even if you are holding an automatic rifle, it can shoot in bursts but not in bursts, and it can shoot in single bursts but not in bursts. It doesn't mean much if you shoot a lot of bullets, it means a lot if you can hit and kill the enemy. While replenishing ammunition for the infantry front, Ruger also directed them to retreat to the west. At the same time, gather the front lines extending along the north-south direction toward the center and shrink the defense line. In this way, the Rajas can come into close contact with the monster tide, which means that the area of the army line affected by it is reduced. In this way, even if the total amount of firepower remains unchanged, the firepower density on the line of troops can be increased a lot. Not to mention that the artillery had also been strengthened by Ruger. As the infantry line retreated and shrank, the several tanks that came back to support also began to slow down under Ruger's command, and targeted those guys with high defense and strong impact in the monster tide. The infantry heavy machine guns were too strenuous to chew those guys. At this time, it had been only 10 minutes since Andariel came out from the ground. But the green poisonous monsters that jumped out with her, except for a few big guys who were deliberately left by the Rogues as backup mounts for Sarah, the rest were shot by heavy machine guns. This is still thanks to Ruger and the other 2 who firmly attracted Andariel's hatred, otherwise the Rogues' cleaning work would not be so smooth. So now, the Rogues can concentrate on dealing with the monster tide rushing out of the catacombs. Although it seems simple to say, for the Rogues, it actually makes a big difference whether Ruger comes to arrange the work or not. Before he came, maybe 1 or 2 people had a vague idea of how to deal with the current situation correctly, but they had no way to turn them into reality. After he came, no matter how simple, rough, and direct the orders were, without any skills, they made the Rogues feel much more at ease, and their efficiency was greatly improved. It took only 1 or 2 minutes, and the monster tide that was about to rush to Andariel was slowly beaten back by Rogues' guns and cannons. At this time, the front line of the monster tide was more than 300 meters away from the small battlefield where Sarah and Andariel were fighting. It can be said that they reversed the decline and turned defeat into victory. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 375. It took only a few minutes for Ruger to solve the problems on the Rogue side relatively perfectly. Google searched can. Looking at Sarah and Tia, they also benefited a lot. With more than 10 Pak-40 anti-tank guns, equivalent to 2 artillery companies, they were able to keep the poisonous demon Andariel firmly in the small battle circle even though there were only 2 of them. In the eyes of the Rogues, Sarah, who held a super long dragon spear and danced it like a chopstick, was the key to Andariel's inability to take it seriously and leave. Of course, that was indeed one of the keys. But only people like Ruger who knew the business understood that Tia's contribution was not small, but probably even greater. Because every time Andariel wanted to gather magic power to use a big move, Tia would miss a shell, and it was a special ammunition loaded with a lot of explosives such as armor-breaking shells. This shell often didn't even hit the monster's fur, but it would blow a small hole on the ground. In the eyes of the rogues, this was probably just her careless mistake. But for those who are familiar with Tia, this matter is not that simple. Tia, firing a cannon, using an explosive armor-piercing shell, but it missed. Are you kidding? Who has ever seen a gourmet who loves to eat and can't tell the difference between dried tofu and beef? In fact, the target of Tia's shells is not Andariel or the monsters at all, they are heading for the ground. Or something on the ground. That's right, it's the poison cloud river that transmits the poison cloud from the highly toxic cave to Andariel's body. That's Andariel's energy source. Just like the power wire of the giant robot in a certain old science fiction animation that I don't know if it can be classified as a robot, apostles, etc. The three of them had tried to cut off the poisonous gas cloud river before, but unfortunately, the water flowed faster than the sword. In addition, the situation on the field changed too quickly, so they could not continue to try. After Tia switched to Ruger's magic-modified leopard, everything was different. The advantage of Tia asking Ruger to replace all the empty magazines with armor-piercing shells was revealed at this time. Because a large number of heavy fragments are not required, the amount of explosives in the armor-piercing shells of the same gun is much higher than that of high-explosive grenades. If converted into TNT equivalent, the amount of explosives in the armor-piercing shells is equivalent to 3 to 5 times that of high-explosive shells. If the armor-piercing shells themselves do not need to be mixed with plastic-like materials that can make them stick to the outer surface of the enemy's armor, or if they can be replaced with some better performance and less glue materials, the amount of explosives can be even higher. Although such high explosive ammunition cannot produce countless heavy and fast-killing fragments to cause more casualties to the enemy, it can produce a blast wave with stronger energy, faster propagation speed and larger range. This kind of bomb should explode near the poisonous gas cloud river. Although it cannot cut it directly, the powerful blast wave can instantly reduce its poisonous cloud flux greatly, or even reduce it to zero. When the poisonous cloud flux is reduced here, Andariel, who is gathering magic power over there, can immediately sense it. In this way, there are only two ways in front of her. One is to risk the surrounding poisonous cloud running out and continue to use the big move, hoping that the enemies on the opposite side who can both fight and hide can be solved by this move, instead of taking advantage of the lack of poisonous clouds around her to kill her. The other is to stop the gathering of magic power, convert the magic energy back into poisonous clouds and store them around her body, continue to accumulate poisonous clouds, and wait for the next opportunity. Even though Andariel seemed to be very upset by the cooperation of Sarashia, and seemed to lose her mind quickly when she got angry, she had not once chosen to use her ultimate skill forcibly. It must be said that this poisonous Andariel really has the unique personality of a poisonous snake, cautious, careful, not impatient, and not easily use her ultimate skill. If she uses it, she will pursue a one-hit kill, otherwise she would rather hold it in. As for whether the armor-breaking shells, which were originally used to attack enemy armor and fortifications, could be accurately hit on the ground where the poisonous cloud river flows, this is a problem for others, even for Luger. But for Tia, it does not exist at all. As long as she wants, she can even use this kind of shell to blow up an almost overlapping riverbed trench on the ground where the poisonous cloud river flows. The bomb girl and the artillery queen are not called for nothing. As she hit there several times, Luger, who commanded the rogue troops, also tried to let the Pack 40 troops help her bomb there. For this reason, Ruger even provided them with non-fragmented explosive added bombs with similar external ballistic performance to high explosive bombs. However, even so, 2 rounds of salvos from 4 or 5 guns can only achieve the general effect of a single shot from the bomb girl. This shows how powerful Tia's single shot is. Seeing that Tia and the others had no major problems, and that Rog and his men were finally able to free up their hands to provide them with more support, Ruger was not in a hurry to join the battle group, and instead became busy in the logistics space again. Well, to be honest, because the modified Leopard tank was requisitioned by TIA, Ruger's only tank that can be compatible with his full set of Iron Man armor is the Inuk. And a light armored patrol vehicle with only a G3 general-purpose machine gun as the driver's controlled weapon is too powerless to face the poisonous Demon King Andariel. What? Let Ruger take off his Irongar armor and drive other tanks in light clothes like Irongar combat suits to participate in the battle? He still wants to live a few more days, so let him go. So the problem now is that even if he wants to join the front-line battle group again, he has to build himself another tank with a driving position that can accommodate his self-made Irongar armor, which is not heavy but wide and thick. Fortunately, after just making a non-magic modification and at most slightly modified Weasel 2 tank destroyer for the rogue artillerymen, Ruger has a new inspiration. Rogues are not interested in this kind of weapon that just puts a cannon on the tank chassis, right? They think it's ugly. No, they think it's simple, right? This is not a problem for Ruger. It's just that he won't use the self-propelled anti-tank gun modified from the chassis of the Type 2 tank. It's not because he lacks gun crew members. With his space full of industrial robots, automatic loaders, and remote-controlled turrets, he had the ability to allow the driver to remotely control an anti-tank gun. What he disliked was the pitiful engine of the Type 2 tank and the backward mobility of the entire structure of the vehicle. He was going to fight Andariel on the front line. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 376. Don't look at Sarah, Taya, and Andariel dealing with each other vigorously. Google search reading. And before, he could keep up with the pace there while driving a modified Little Leopard. But that's because the modified Ziohuabao has a modern engine with 1080 plus horsepower. Searched can on Google. In addition, he has modernized the tank from its transmission system to its action system, such as gearbox, suspension, and other components. Therefore, the maneuverability of that Little Leopard is even stronger than that of the Leopard 2A4. But the poor number 2 tank chassis only has a 130 horsepower Maybach HL57TR gasoline engine. In addition, the total weight of the gun, vehicle, automatic device, and ammunition is at least 6 to 7 tons. Just calculate the power-to-weight ratio, 130 horsepower ratio 7 tons, which is about 6. When counting the Leopard 2A4 before, it also had 1,500 horsepower compared to 55 tons, so it was 27. The difference between 1080 and 30 is even greater. Therefore, for Ruger, even if he continues to use the PaK 40, he has to replace the chassis. What's more, he didn't want to use that anti-tank gun. After this short but complicated battle, Luger was reminded of another thing by the endless fighting methods on Shailati Ya's side. Rocket launcher. Although he has basically never used the rocket launcher, he and his 2 ladies have used the power device of the rocket launcher a lot. The rocket engine booster was originally made by him based on the structural modification of rockets. Compared with rockets, the warhead is completely eliminated and replaced with more fuel. So the engine operating time of these boosters is longer than the few seconds that rockets generally have. Although it hasn't grown much yet. The reason why I would rather change the rocket into a booster than use it on the battlefield is mainly because it consumes too much ammunition, and in comparison, its power against high-level monsters is not particularly obvious. Fully loaded with dozens or even dozens of rockets, it can be fired in a salvo of a few seconds or even tens of seconds. If you want to reload, the cost of ammunition is extremely high, and the process is quite laborious. However, due to the low speed of these gadgets, the warheads can only choose from limited types such as high-explosive bombs and armor-piercing bombs, but cannot use various armor-piercing bombs, so their damage effect on high-level monsters is limited. Therefore, for Rogue's troops, this thing is a typical weapon with extremely low cost performance. In the words of Sarah when she rejected Ruger, "You just give me this for free and I don't want it. Even if you don't charge me for the ammunition, I still think it's a waste of my manpower." But, just now, Tia showed Lugger a way to effectively injure Andariel even with the big explosive ammunition. Armor-breaking bullets. This kind of warhead, which was naturally eliminated when tanks and armored vehicles from various countries entered the era of composite armor, hit the poisonous Demon King Andariel. Although it is not as effective as the tail-stabilized discarding Sabo armor-piercing projectiles, the effect is still high. Just now, Taya used an armor-breaking bullet to smear Du-An's face, and she beat the guy until he was disgraced and furious. The big guy was almost unable to control himself, endured the excessive poison cloud/mana consumption, and forced his attack on Taya. Even if the armor-breaking bullet cannot directly kill Andariel, as long as it can cause such a big reaction from her, it will be considered effective, right? Moreover, the armor-breaking bullets used by Tia were just fired from a 105mm rifled cannon. The total weight of the warhead was less than 12 kilograms. It used less than 2 kilograms of military explosive RDX, converted into equivalent TNT equivalent. It's about 3 kilograms. Based on the above information, Ruger began to formulate what-if hypotheses. What if he uses a rocket launcher and replaces the warheads of the rockets with armor-breaking bombs? Then hitting Andariel would be enough to give her a drink, right? What? Rockets not accurate enough? Precision-guided rockets and magical radiation will damage electronic components? Well, this is indeed a problem. However, this problem is that when calculating based on the rocket's original range of several kilometers, 10 kilometers, or even tens of kilometers, the accuracy is not enough. If this is a face-to-face output, such as firing a gun from 3 to 500 meters away, there won't be a landing error of 1 or 2 meters, right? Even if there is 1 or 2 meters, with Andariel's height of 5 meters, it seems that he is not afraid of missing. That's great. Wouldn't it be nice to reload more ammunition and blast her a few more times? As long as Ruger is guarding the rocket launcher, is he still worried about running out of ammunition? I'm afraid that before the ammunition is finished, the launcher itself is almost overheated by the engine exhaust flame and cannot work. But that doesn't matter, Ruger will directly replace the launcher with a new one. Gee, think about it this way. Weapons like rockets are obviously more suitable for him who has logistics space and a system store. I didn't use it before. It was really because I had no money, no points, and no suitable warheads, so the price/performance ratio was not high. The most important thing is that Lugger actually seized the Zeus World War II rocket launcher from the arsenal in the charming dungeon. It is the famous Panzerwerfer 42 150mm self-propelled rocket launcher. However, Ruger will not use it directly. Its chassis is an armored SDKFZ-3 Maltier half-track vehicle. This armored half-track vehicle was given a new number SDKFZ-4/1. SDKFZ is also a German abbreviation. Its original name is Sonderkraftfahrzeug, which is translated as Special Motor Vehicle. Because it is translated as Special Purpose Vehicle in a certain language, it is also translated as Special Purpose Vehicle. However, there are many vehicles in this number sequence of the Zoo family, not just those eye-catching half-tracks. It was the official number given to military equipment vehicles by the Military Supply Unit, Army Weapons Office, at that time. Even the tanks from number 1 to number 6 have their own SDKFZ numbers. For example, the number 4 tank has the corresponding number 161. And the number 4 tank destroyer has the number 162. There is also the number 5 Leopard tank, which corresponds to 171. The Cheetah tank destroyer with the same chassis as the Leopard is 173. What? There is a missing 172 in the middle? Well, it is said that they want to make an assault gun with the Leopard chassis. But, there are not enough resources to share, and the anti-tank pressure is high. So, let's talk about those half-tracks. These half-track vehicles actually look quite strange. Mainly because they no longer appear in daily life during the era when Ruger lived. But he would not dislike their appearance. What he disliked was still their poor mobility. The chassis horsepower of this 42 type rocket launcher is only 68 horsepower, and with its total weight of 1 ton, the power-to-weight ratio is only a pitiful 6 horsepower per ton. It is even far worse than the simple Weasel, that is, Sable, tank destroyer with a power-to-weight ratio of 6 that Ruger made for ROG. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 377. The power-to-weight ratio is only a pitiful 6 horsepower per ton, so you can imagine how much Ruger dislikes it. As for the chassis, in Ruger's new design, these SDKFZ half-track series will definitely not be used. However, the significance of the chassis is to be used in conjunction with rockets, so before determining the chassis, Ruger needs to make rockets first. The chassis of the Type 42 rocket launcher cannot be used, but the set of 10-barrel rocket launchers can be used. At most, the sighting and remote control can be improved. But compared with the chassis, the launcher is basically unchanged. I hope readers will remember our domain name Taiwan Novel Network rightward arrow. Then there is the missile body itself. The work of Walter Domergue, the Alchemist Master, the 150mm caliber Do-38 rocket, has no tail fins to save costs. It relies on the inclined nozzle to make the shell spin, thereby obtaining sufficient stability in flight and maintaining sufficient accuracy. This thing was originally installed in a frame-shaped cage launch tube. It is similar to the rectangular frame cage on both sides of the vehicle body used by the SDKFZ-251 half-track rocket launcher, that is, the Type 40 launcher. The accuracy is not extremely poor, but it is quite poor. When it reaches the maximum range of about 5 or 6 kilometers, the error can be more than 200 meters. Even if it is converted proportionally, it can be off by 20 meters even if it is shot at 500 meters. Andariel is only 5 meters high, not 50 meters high. With such a large error, it is really unusable. So let alone Ruger, it seems that the zoo didn't use it much either. They put 280mm and 320mm rockets with larger diameters, more explosives, and wider effective range in the same cage on the SDKFZ-251. How does that saying go? Even if the target is off by 1 kilometer, as long as the explosion can cover a radius of 2 kilometers, there is no problem. After that, the 150mm rocket was changed to the barrel launch tube, which is the 41 type Enbo Spiegel. This is to allow the projectile to obtain a relatively high spin speed in the closed launch tube first, thereby improving accuracy. By the way, the 41 type Nebelwerfer also has versions that can launch the 280 or even 320mm rockets mentioned earlier, but they still use an open frame cage launcher, which does not require this spin. It can be seen that a large effective killing range means that you can be willful. After the 150mm was changed to the barrel, the accuracy was greatly improved, at least it is relatively easy to use in large-scale coverage shooting. So later, they just designed a 10-link frame and put it on the tank as a self-propelled rocket launcher. That is the Type 42. However, that thing was enough for the Zoo family in World War II, but it was still not enough for Ruger. Fortunately, he has accumulated enough now, and he has a large family and a lot of options. The rocket is not accurate enough, right? It doesn't matter. You can refer to the design of the large-caliber anti-tank missiles next door. For combat vehicles, armed helicopters, etc., the anti-tank missiles launched by tubes are also used. Although the guidance system cannot be moved to rockets, there is one thing that can definitely be used. That is the folding wings of those two launched missiles. If the rocket is not accurate enough, it is equivalent to an arrow without feathers, flying unsteadily and shooting inaccurately. Then, just add feathers to them. Whether it is the hot anti-tank missile developed by the Zhu family and the neighboring company, or the At-6 spiral anti-tank missile on the Big Dog helicopter, Jaguar attack helicopter, they all have feathers. And the structures of these two missiles are similar. Both have a diameter of about 130 millimeters, a length of about 3 meters, and a total weight of between 2 and 30 kilograms. It is quite comparable to the rocket with a length of about 1 meter, a diameter of 150 millimeters, and a total weight of more than 30 but less than 40 kilograms. With this similarity, as long as the aerodynamic shape is slightly changed in the direction of the anti-tank missile, the folding wings can be ejected or even copied. With the direction of the flight power part, the missile body can be trial produced, and Ruger is busy with the warhead. The original high-explosive TNT charge of the 150 mm rocket is only about 2 or 3 kilograms, which seems to be less than the nearly 3 kilograms of TIA's 105 mm tank gun armor-piercing shell. However, that is because the two types of bullets are different, and the killing mechanism is also different. High-explosive bombs rely on explosives to blast out a large number of fragments, making high-speed fragments kill the enemy like dense bullets. Armor-fragmenting shells rely solely on the explosion shockwave of explosives. Hitting armor will collapse the inner armor, hitting bunkers will collapse building materials, and shockwaves will vibrate. Therefore, the amount of explosives in armor-fragmenting shells of the same caliber and launcher is naturally higher than that of high-explosive shells, and the former is about 3 times that of the latter. This means that if the original 150 mm rocket is used as a benchmark for calculation, its warhead is changed to an armor-fragmenting shell, and its TNT equivalent can be increased to about 9 kilograms. At this level, it is always much stronger than TIA's armor-fragmenting shells, right? It hurts to think about Andariel when it hits her. But will Ruger stop here? Obviously not. His rockets are not really meant to be fired 5 or 6 kilometers away. On the contrary, as long as this kind of shell can fly 500 meters, it is enough for him. However, in order to avoid being intercepted by Andariel, this thing must have good acceleration performance. It is best to accelerate to subsonic speed soon after leaving the launch tube, and maintain this speed to fly directly to 500 meters away. After that, even if it runs out of fuel and loses power immediately and can only glide, it is not a problem at all. Is this difficult? Not difficult, not difficult at all. The speed of sound is 340 meters per second. If it flies at subsonic speed, even if it is 300 meters per second, the rocket engine only needs to work for less than 2 seconds to fly 500 meters at this speed. Whether it is the rocket mentioned above or the anti-tank missile, the working time of the rocket engine cannot reach more than 10 seconds, but at least it is much better than 2 seconds. In short, after adding, subtracting and redesigning according to the needs, the rocket that Ruger finally finalized was made into a shape close to the Hot -3 anti-tank missile. That is, 150 mm diameter, 1,300 mm, 1 meter 3, length, fat warhead, 4 pop-up folding wings are arranged from the middle to the rear third of the body, and the diameter becomes 310 mm after the wings are unfolded. The TNT equivalent of its armor-piercing warhead has been increased to a terrifying 16 kilograms, while the weight of the warhead itself is just less than 40 kilograms. This is a special weapon that is definitely not cheap to manufacture, and is extremely biased. It can only be used as a firework or a performance art prop on the modern battlefield. However, after Ruger tested it in the logistics space, he was very satisfied with its combat performance. Today, after several expansions, the logistics space is more than 10 times larger than it was at the beginning. In addition to being able to accommodate more tanks, what Ruger is most satisfied with is the shooting range that has reached a length of nearly a kilometer. Although that place is a dedicated space for the shooting range, it can only be used for shooting tests and cannot accommodate other items. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 378. The huge shooting range in the logistics space provides Ruger with an exclusive area for verification of various weapons. It does not require him to look for experimental sites for live ammunition testing every time he designs a new weapon. Once the problem of ammunition is solved, he can turn around and determine the choice of chassis. He used a lightweight 42 type self-propelled rocket launcher with 10 launchers, plus 10 40 kg rockets, and the total weight was barely controlled within 1 ton. However, he also had to add sighting, fire control and remote control launch devices to the set of things, and also add the weight of his own Iron Man armor, so the entire rocket system was counted as 5 tons. This is still a very small number. If the combat module is light enough, there will be a lot of room for choice of chassis. Finally, in pursuit of mobility and ease of production, Ruger chose a tracked chassis from the Cold War era that he already had but had never used. This time, he didn't plan to transplant the 1080 plus horsepower engine from the Puma infantry fighting vehicle, but to use the one that already existed in this chassis. This saves modification time. This thing is nicknamed Martyr. Weasel, or Mink, are all it. Well, it has the same nickname as the simple tank destroyer he just made for ROG. That's right, this is the predecessor of the Puma infantry fighting vehicle, the Weasel infantry fighting vehicle that Ruger got from the Bloody Countess. This vehicle originally weighed 5 tons, and the latest improved version can weigh about 38 tons. For modernization, a lot of good things have been added. In comparison, the engine power is only 660 horsepower, which is indeed not comparable to the 1080 plus horsepower engine of the next generation Puma infantry fighting vehicle. But fortunately, the modern fire control observation information and other systems of this thing are of no use to Ruger, so they are directly dismantled to reduce weight. At the same time, this thing itself is an infantry fighting vehicle, which is reserved for infantry combatants. This part of the space and weight is useless, so continue to dismantle it. As for the small caliber rapid fire gun of the main weapon, it can be dismantled. Finally, except for its chassis frame, Ruger simply rebuilt it. The key is to be compatible with the Iron Man armor, have good protection performance, and be light enough. When the rocket launcher is also put on, the final weight of this thing is controlled by Ruger at about 20 tons. In this way, the power-to-weight ratio becomes 33 horsepower per ton. Although this number is lower than the modified Leopard driven by TIA, it is higher than 2 Leopard 2A4S. It means that this car can easily reach a speed of more than 80 km per hour under Ruger's control. Because the chassis is based on the physical object, that is, things are dismantled from the finished equipment, and then the already built rocket launchers and adaptive outer armor and other parts are installed, so the whole car is made very quickly. Basically, not long after Ruger completed the design, various industrial robots in the logistics space have completed the modification of the tank under his control. He tested the launch of the whole vehicle's rockets at the shooting range again, and then found an opportunity to alchemize this thing. The time consumed before and after was longer than putting the Pak-40 on the chassis of the No. 2 tank, but not much longer. At this time, the battlefield still did not change much. On the rogue front, the group of monsters coming from the underground tomb was still controlled 300 meters away from the east side of the Andariel battlefield. The Pak-40 of the 2 artillery companies could still allocate a quarter to a third of the firepower to support Shalishia and the 2 who were fighting the poisonous Demon King. On the Andariel side, being harassed back and forth by 2 masters would be fine, but being harassed by some rogues who were only small insects in her eyes with the weapons of the Lost Ones, her anger was visibly accumulating. At this time, She also found that she seemed to be restricted by the enemy from connecting with the poisonous cloud energy in the underground cave, resulting in the inability to accumulate enough magic power to use the big move, which was very passive. So while she was fighting with Sarah and the others, she began to consciously return to the underground cave corroded by venom. Ruger's mind had just returned from the logistics space, and he noticed this trend after taking a look at the battlefield's situation. Tia and the others had noticed it long ago. However, they did not rush to take action, but consciously adjusted their positions to vacate the area connecting Andariel and the underground cave for the rogues who were supporting from the rear. The posture was obvious, that is, to let the rogues prepare. Once Andariel forcibly escaped from the three-person fighting area and returned to the underground cave, she would be covered with heavy firepower by the artillery array. However, Andariel was not stupid. When she found that the rogue artillery was also a threat to her, and she could not quickly eliminate those artillery units, she used other methods. Her poisonous monster followers. To be honest, those monster followers were quite useful against the Free Nephilim before, but they were much weaker when facing the rogue's gun and artillery blockade. This cannot be said to be that they are too incompetent, but that their opponents are too cunning. Well, it should be said that their opponents are too rich. If the rogues still use the previous 762 rifle bullets, with the corrosive power of the poisonous monster followers and the poison cloud, they will hardly be hurt by those bullets. Even if they change to 7x 99mm caliber ordinary heavy machine gun bullets, more than half of the ammunition will be corroded by the poison cloud, losing its lethality to the poisonous monsters. However, Ruger was rich, so he replaced the ammunition for rogues with tungsten core armor-piercing bullets. Tungsten cores are not completely invulnerable to poison clouds, but the corrosion efficiency is much lower. Anyway, after being shot by these ammunition for 2 or 3 times, most of the monster followers in the poison cloud will be killed. So now, the poison cloud around Andariel is getting thinner and thinner, and there are only a few monster followers left. Moreover, almost all of them are the green-haired giant beasts that can be controlled by Sarah's radom worm and turned into her mount. In fact, if it weren't for leaving more mount materials for Sarah to change, even these monster followers would have to be killed. From this point of view, Andariel, the highly toxic monster, as one of the 7 giants of the burning hell, is also miserable for fighting this battle like this. He looks like a dungeon boss besieged by a group of players. Even though the situation was so bad, Andariel still came up with a way to break the impasse. She was restrained by Sarah and the others, and there were only a few huge beasts left among the monster followers. Well, just send them out. But she didn't send them to attack Sarashia to save herself, nor did she directly attack the rogue artillery formation to destroy the long-range artillery support. Under her command, those huge green-haired beasts actually rushed towards the underground cave. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Ai-Chi-Ji. Chapter 379. Seeing those huge beasts voluntarily escape from the protection of the poisonous cloud, several artillery rogues instantly became a little uneasy. While informing their comrades of the situation, they turned their guns and prepared to take this opportunity to kill them all. However, they were soon stopped by Miss G36, who was temporarily acting as the artillery commander. If you keep them, Commander Sarah will use them as mounts. But they have already left the war zone, the itchy rogue gunner argued. Then keep it for now. Miss G36 pointed at Andariel. Look at that guy, she is only chasing after Commander Sarah and attacking her mount. It is obvious that she wants to make the commander lose mobility as soon as possible. If we kill those huge beasts, it means that we can help that guy to block Commander Sarah. But, isn't Lady Tia there? With the performance of Lady Tia's chariot, it is no problem for the commander to use it as a mount. There is no need to worry about being controlled by others, another rogue also said. Lady Tia's chariot is fast enough, but if the commander also sits on that chariot, how can the two of them cooperate to fight against the Demon King? Sister G36 said in a deep voice. Wouldn't the two of them become one person? Then, let Lord Ruger go over and be Commander Sarah's mount. The first rogue gunner chuckled, and looked up in front of him, pretending to search. Huh? Where is Lord Ruger? Where did he run off to again? When it came to Ruger, the rogue artillerymen became excited again, and no longer bothered to ask Sister G36 to agree to let them fight the giant beast. Instead, they looked at the front line of infantry fighting vehicles and started looking for Ruger from inside. The rogue infantry fighting vehicle was an Inuk light armored patrol vehicle, and Ruger had previously driven his Inuk with a modified cab. Trying to find him out of the infantry fighting vehicle line was really like playing a game like Find the Difference. These rogue gunners were young people who were easy to accept new things, and naturally liked to play around, so they formed a group to play directly. However, Ruger had just replaced his car with a modified Type 42 self-propelled rocket launcher on the chassis of the Weasel infantry fighting vehicle. If the rogues followed Inuk to look for it, they would not be able to find it for a while. I wonder who will be more flexible or have better luck to find the Weasel infantry fighting vehicle that they have never seen before in the tank group earlier. At the same time, Andariel's green-haired giant beasts had successfully rushed through the rogue heavy machine gun blockade and jumped directly back to the underground cave filled with poisonous clouds. The rogue artillerymen could find that Andariel was intentionally attacking Sarah's mount, and the rogues on the infantry fighting vehicle line could naturally find it. Their final response was the same. They would rather let them go than cut off Sarah's mount reserve. But no one expected that these huge beasts would actually jump into the underground cave and be run. What was even more unexpected was that just when the rogues were wondering if they had made a mistake by letting them go, these guys actually jumped out of the underground caves one by one and immediately ran towards Andariel. What's going on? The rogues were even more confused. Wait, why do they look a little different? A rogue stared at them closely and asked in confusion. Why are they different? Aren't they still tall, big, and stupid? The rogue next to him replied casually. No, it's not about the size, it's, what is it? Don't you feel that something is wrong, something strange? It seems to be a little bit, but if I really want to say it, I can't say it. Huh? So you have this feeling too? Actually, I do too. As more and more rogues joined the discussion, from the second-line infantry array to the third-line artillery position, most of the rogue troops fell into this kind of knowing that something is wrong, but I just don't know what's wrong puzzlement. Until a familiar male voice sounded in front of the front line. Quick, kill them, don't let them touch Andariel. There are changes in them, their hair has become greener, and it is shiny. Andariel thinks they are the logistics workers of Duyun. The speaker is Ruger sitting in the cockpit of the Weasel infantry fighting vehicle chassis. What? So that's it? After he said it, the rogue finally realized it. Quick. All units pay attention, focus on those green big guys. Kill them. Boom boom boom. For a while, the roar of anti-tank guns came one after another. However, those huge beasts filled with green light turned a deaf ear, did not look back or dodge, and still rushed towards Andariel with all their strength. But there is one thing, they are actually running in a long line. From the perspective of the rogue artillery, it is like watching them perform thousand-handed Guanyin, and only the back of the last monster can be seen. Most of the rogues could only vaguely see the limbs of those in front of it swaying as they ran. As a result, most rogues could only attack the last huge beast. Even if the concentrated fire of several artillery, heavy machine guns, and automatic rifles could kill that guy instantly, it would still take some time for it to fall to the ground after being shot and injured and give way to its compatriots in front. Although this process does not take much time, it is enough for the other giant beasts to run a considerable distance. In this way, the rogues can kill at most 3, and the remaining ones will definitely run to Andariel. The toxic demon king over there is also stepping up the pursuit of Shalashia and the others, making it impossible for them to cooperate with the rogues to attack the giant beasts from other angles, and is also ready to support them. Once she feels that the time is right, she will probably turn back and rush towards the giant beast. If the time she can gain by doing this is also counted, the rogues may only be able to kill 2. Spread out, find a side shooting angle, Sister G36 shouted and directed the artillery to change their formation. It's too late. Ruger sighed in his heart, stepped on the accelerator directly, and the Weasel infantry fighting vehicle chassis, which was already moving slowly towards Andariel, immediately ran out. According to his calculations, the rogues, plus Tia who turned around and attacked the giant beast from front and back, can only kill 3 of those things at most. But Andariel had already secretly gathered the magic power in the poisonous cloud around him, and was ready to use the green light flashing teleportation trick to respond to the monster followers at any time. Ruger had no reference standard to know how much energy the poisonous cloud magic energy carried by the huge beast could provide to Andariel. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Ai Chi Ji. Chapter 380. However, the poisonous cloud magic power will definitely give Andariel 1 or 2 more energy to use his ultimate move. If they were allowed to come into contact with this, Shalashia, who had just been fighting with Andariel for so long, would have no objection. I hope readers will remember our domain name Taiwan Novel Network rightward arrow. Not to mention how many people the rogue troops would be killed or injured under the toxic demon king's ultimate move. The rogues are actually in a very bad situation now. It's not that they are in a bad state. In fact, they are full of energy, energetic, and relaxed. They are actually in a very good state. But the bad thing is that they are too relaxed. Shalashia and Ruger, the 3 of them, in the fight with Andariel, all deliberately wanted to make the battle look more relaxed, so that the rogues would not be too nervous, so as to avoid being afraid before the battle and losing 3 points first. However, in fact, none of them were really that relaxed, including Ruger who was still in the rear recently. If it was really relaxed, he would not have used the payment capacity of the logistics space twice at this time to produce new equipment at a very fast speed. He was like this, not to mention the 2 women who were fighting with Andariel at almost 0 distance in front. Yes, they themselves were all demon gods, and when facing Andariel, they would not be scared by her title of one of the 7 demon kings of the burning hell. But, this does not mean that their strength can really ignore the physical body of the Queen of Pain with hell level. They are definitely not false in spirit, and they are fully qualified to despise their opponents in strategy, but the huge gap in hard power still requires them to not make any mistakes in reality and in battle. The problem is that not only did they really not make any mistakes, but they also showed their mental relaxation. The performance was too obvious, so that it affected the rogue over there. In fact, didn't the rogue know that the 2 women over there were quite different from Andariel in absolute hard power? They knew it, too. But seeing how easily the 2 women fought Andariel, the rogue subconsciously forgot about the gap. In the rogue's opinion, as long as they cooperated with the 2 women, it was only a matter of time to kill Andariel. They themselves only needed to do a good job of supporting. This was what Ruger was most worried about. The rogues lost the tension they should have on the battlefield. They lost their vigilance against being killed by Andariel. In this state, once Andariel used a big move and aimed at the rogue troops, it would be difficult for them to survive the big move. But in this case, Ruger could not make them make positive and reasonable changes just by talking. Or, he was afraid that telling the truth directly would only make the rogue's situation more dangerous. So, in the end, he had no choice but to take the initiative. 2 6-cylinder water-cooled diesel engine fully opened power, but in just a few breaths, it helped him accelerate the 20-ton modified self-propelled rocket launcher to 30 kilometers per hour. Awkward. Why is it so slow? There is no way. The power-to-weight ratio of this thing is greater than that of Leopard 2A4, which means that the maximum speed it can reach will be higher than the latter's 72 km per hour. But it takes 7 seconds for Leopard 2A4 to accelerate to 32 km per hour. After all, these tanks are not professional racing cars, they are too heavy. Remember, Ruger's first car, the muscle car with a monster engine, the first-generation Dodge Challenger, its engine power is more than 400 horsepower. Because the engine horsepower is large enough, he later even transplanted this thing to the Weasel airborne tank with only the chassis left to provide it with power, and the result is still not bad. That Dodge Challenger only takes a little more than 4 seconds to accelerate to 100 km per hour. But its own weight is less than 2 tons. On the other hand, the engine power of the current modified self-propelled rocket launcher is only about 50% higher, but the weight is 10 times that of that one. This acceleration ability is naturally impossible to be compared. Seeing that he could not rush over in time, Ruger made up his mind and simply pulled down the periscope optical sight next to him that had been synchronized with the launcher calibration, and then held the launcher direction joystick on the right side of his body. His optical sight is based on the same principle as the sight of the main gun of the tank in World War II, so there is no need for electronic chips. Using the microposition method to measure the distance from Andariel to about 300 meters, he immediately corrected the launcher position through the joystick and aimed the scale line corresponding to 300 meters in the sight at the huge body of that guy. Then, he gently pressed the launch button on the joystick. Chi! A unique rocket engine sound sounded instantly, and the volume soon weakened. At the same time, the rocket had hit Andariel's side, and the plastic explosive inside immediately covered most of her shoulders and arms. Boom! The detonator detonated more than 10 kilograms of high explosives, and immediately attacked her with an inch-palm attack like an inch punch. Roar! After being severely injured, Andariel couldn't help but cry out in pain, and immediately ignored Sarah, who was about to leave, staring at Ruger with red eyes. However, when she turned around, Ruger's next rocket's armor-piercing warhead immediately stuck directly to her chest. Boom! This time, Andariel was more seriously injured. The previous blow was probably equivalent to Andariel hitting her shoulder hard. Although the pain was very strong, the actual damage was not that great because the shoulder had enough injury tolerance. But the second blow was like a heavy punch to her chest. A punch of the same strength might only hurt the shoulder, but a punch to the chest could make a person lose mobility instantly. Because this is the concentration point of internal organs. Although Andariel is a hell monster and a demon king, his physiological structure should be different from that of humans. However, as a human, even if the chest does not contain human internal organs, this important and core position will only contain important and core organs. It's like the legs of monsters can walk, and the hands of demon kings can wave. This characteristic will not be fundamentally different as the species change. So the second blow really hurt her. She was scared. On the other hand, when Ruger found that the first rocket had accurately hit Andariel, he did not hesitate at all and immediately pressed the launch button on the joystick continuously. So the remaining 9 rockets in the launcher also came out one after another, and rushed straight to Andariel. When the toxic Demon King was hurt by the second blow and glared at Ruger with more anger, he saw the fathead rockets in the air one after another.